campaigns in around 50 countries around the world, and our specific focus is to try and address some of the fundamental causes of poverty, and specifically giving a voice to poor communities, poorest people, particularly women, in developing countries. And as a reflection of that, our head office is also based in Johannesburg, in the Global South. Action Aid has been working on biofuels for a few years, and we have a biofuels campaign, which I manage, is one of 2 campaigns that Action Aid runs in the UK, so it's a big issue for us. And for a number of reasons, which we'll get into a little bit, I've been engaging also with Rio Plus 20 discussions, trying to get biofuels to be a topic that is actually part of the results of Rio. As you've probably all heard during this event, you know from your work yourselves, sustainable development is all about human choices, making sure that people can fulfill their rights to food, to water, to a certain quality of life without at the same time compromising future generations. And there are no easy solutions to that, and that is really the focus of my little intervention. There are no magic solutions, and there won't be any found next week at Rio, and although none will be found, lots of effort will nevertheless be made to try and come up with new technological, magical ones. But we know from the past that this kind of insane search for technical fixes, if it ignores real people's needs and what happens to people on the ground, then they can't possibly really solve our problems. The focus, our prime example for that is biofuels. My first question to myself is biofuels the magical wand? I don't know how much you know about biofuels, but certainly biofuels was seen by many as a magical solution back in I'd say 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Biofuels was fantastic. Very easily we had a triple win situation. You could simply take food, pop it into cars, didn't have to change the cars or really the distribution system, and you would save greenhouse gases. Fantastic. At the same time, you create more demand, you increase prices for a kind of flailing agricultural sector in Europe, you even create jobs in developing countries, and you increase your energy security, and you give transport a fantastic green way out, and isn't it all great? That was the dream. Well, you may follow this occasionally. It hits the headlines, lots of coverage in the press, because biofuels hasn't turned out to be a dream. It's already, and I therefore challenge kind of the title of this presentation, it's already turning out to be a disaster. And what makes it significant is that this has a significant scale. It is a massive impact. We're not talking about a small techie issue that affects a few people, a few policy wonks or whatever. This is an issue that is rolling out an impact on people on a massive scale. I always like to use this figure, the food sector in calorific terms, I hope no one holds me to the actual data, represents about 1/20th of the size of the energy sector. It's pretty small compared to the energy sector. And therefore this idea of shifting food into meeting some of our energy needs, you can see immediately what that might mean in terms of impacts on food. It's a big issue. So to give some examples of why this biofuel technical magical solution, why I say that's already a disaster that's happened. Well, at the social level, which is Action Aid's primary concern, unfortunately we have mounting evidence, a very strong evidence base now, of what biofuels do for people in developing countries. One statistics tells us that the land or an area the size of Germany has already been diverted to grow crops for biofuels. That's a lot of land, so what? That's great. Well, in the process of doing that, that land has often been grabbed. And that means that people who already struggle to kind of eke a living from the land are pushed off land and are put in more difficult situations than they had been previously. So there's already a huge impact in terms of number of people affected locally. But also, we've just come out with another report. Another big issue is the impact that biofuels, using crops for energy instead of food, what that does for food prices. Biofuels was, I think everyone agrees, is a significant factor in the big food price spikes that we've seen 2007, 8, 2010, 11. We have just done a piece of work, and we can say for some crops, you're looking at the EU biofuel targets, biofuel policies pushing up the price of some commodities by 36%. So this is, again, a scale. It's a big issue. It's not a minor thing, and it's happening. It's already happened, and it will continue to happen. So there's a social kind of disaster. There's the environmental side. Of course, biofuels at the end of the day was about saving us from climate change and certain doom. Well, again, research that we commissioned with other NGOs tells us that, in fact, the UK's plans for biofuels, so UK policies, would basically be like putting another 6 million cars onto UK roads. So biofuels aren't a green solution either. And then there's the kind of economic madness side. It's rubbish for people, it's rubbish for the environment, and we're paying a huge amount of money for it. And there's lots of figures, and we've done some on the cost of British motorists, but $1.4 trillion in the next 25 years will be spent on biofuel subsidies. It's quite a lot of money. That's worldwide. So big issues, large scale, a lot of impact. I wanted just to bring this home a little bit with a video, and this is where things could, of course, go wrong. This says play animation. Does anyone know how to play an animation? No, it was on there. I did it earlier and it worked, annoyingly. Here, animations. There you go. Okay? Yeah. Can we all see that? Just a very short film, just to let you see a little bit what's happening.
You've come to the end, so the good news restart.
No, maybe this isn't going to work. Yes, it's the wrong one.
I'm showing them in sequence.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. There you go. Okay, inshallah. End of discussion. Otherwise we give up, it doesn't matter. I wonder why it says end. No. Okay, well I'll give you the other one at the end, so just I'll continue on that. So that little video that I'll try and send out later, that was basically just trying to let you kind of see from a personal perspective how biofuels are affecting people at the local level, what it means for people when a biofuel company comes in, whether they do little deals or not, what it means in terms of their long-term potential for development, what it means for sending their kids to school, what it means for having enough food to eat, etc. So that's basically, those are our main kind of issues with biofuels, the social, the environmental, and the public in an economic crisis is also wasting a huge amount of money on a policy that's taking us in the wrong direction. I think what we've been seeing in the last few months as we approach Rio +20 Summit, and on Monday and Tuesday, of course, is also the G20 Summit, and in July we also have a Hunger Summit, is that even though biofuels is seen and is acknowledged as having these tremendous impacts, somehow biofuels stays the elephant in the room, as we like to say. Everyone knows it's there, but somehow no one is wanting to deal with it. So I think now we're at the stage where whatever report is written that looks at environmental policies or lack of coherence between policies or impacts of northern policies on southern countries, biofuels is always used as an example of a problem. It's so widely documented now that biofuels is a problem. It's a mistake. We've had the European Commissioner for Hedegaard for climate say, if we'd known that, knew now what we'd known then, etc. So report after report comes out and says biofuels are bad. In July last year, we even had the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the OECD, UNFAO, 10 international organisations who aren't normally on the radical side, coming out with a statement calling for biofuel support to be stopped. In their case, particularly because of the impact on food prices. Even the heads of the B20, which is this coalition of business leaders that lobbies the G20, so really big corporations have come out a couple of months ago calling for biofuel subsidies to be dropped. So in a way everyone's talking about biofuels, but no one's talking about biofuels because there's a very strong counter lobby, because there's a lot of vested interests, and here we're looking at the agricultural lobby for sure, but also the petroleum sector. And biofuels is now an area where big petrol companies are increasingly investing and lobbying. And biofuels is also, not only is there a heavy lobby, but politicians are just in a difficult place because they don't actually want to tell the public that what we've been doing for the last 5 years is been taking us up the wrong path. And that is why, at Rio, which is all about sustainable development and green growth that takes into account poverty reduction, we'll not be talking about biofuels because the interests are simply too high. And instead, unfortunately, not only won't they be talking about it, there are huge efforts underway, which will probably succeed, to get a new sustainable energy deal, which is brilliant, except that it's a way of getting, we fear, a massive surge in biofuel investment globally, and that would be a disaster. So in other words, under the name of sustainable energy, we will go further down this bad road. Okay, I'm sure I've overrun on time. Is tackling biofuels a radical option? That was the suggestion with the conference. How do we, what radical solutions do we need to tackle this issue that won't be tackled at Rio? We don't think it's radical. Lots of other organisations, fairly mainstream, don't think it's radical to get rid of biofuel policies. It's a fairly easy thing to do. There's a policy in place pushing biofuels. It is fairly easy to remove a policy that is in place. And there are multiple options available. Reducing the speed limit, increasing fuel efficiency of cars, very much within our reach. Increasing rail freight. At much less cost would give much greater benefit. I think what is radical is biofuels is an example of bioenergy, we'll get into that, and at the end of the day people have to accept that there are limits, and in case of biofuels there is very little that is truly sustainable. Unless you're really talking about waste products, real waste, there's actually very little that can be used for biofuel. And the most radical part of all is that we believe ultimately that we need to be using bioenergy or biofuel that is locally grown. And that challenges the basic assumption that the Global South is there for us to use to meet our northern energy demands, even though 1 billion people are going hungry. Now, I think that's a pretty ridiculous situation, but I hope, and we just have a minute to, maybe it won't work, but to oh no, it's not going to work. I'll try and figure it out, and we can see this later at the end of the discussion, because it's a very funny film that we did to highlight the ludicrousy of where we are. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.